Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we have Ethan with us, and I have had a word with Ethan when I was using Gauge for one of my clients, Finny, and we have had a detailed conversation around AEO and GEO. And when I wanted to make the video around it, I knew that Ethan would be the best person to go to and answer all the questions that I have. So, welcome to my channel, Ethan, and thank you so much for taking out the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Muskan. Yeah, really happy to go through all the AEO questions and start to answer them.
100%. So, for my audience, would you want to give a quick introduction about what do you do, what your background is, what do you do at Gauge, and then we can dive right into the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Gauge is a platform for helping brands improve their AEO, GEO, AI SEO, whatever you call it, and your traditional search visibility. We run prompts every single day through all the leading models, collect that data, analyze it, come up with recommendations, and have our agent available to analyze and action on that data. Um,
Got it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's start with one of the most burning questions, and I feel there are so many myths going around on this. That is GEO or AEO different from SEO, or is it the same thing, just probably termed differently? Like, what are your views on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Um, we see them as very related areas, but definitely distinct patterns. Um, with AEO versus traditional search, the average query a user writes to Google is 2 to 3 words long, and you really only get seen by a user if you're one of the first couple links. There's a power law distribution to clicks. So the first URL that comes up for a 3-word click or 3-word search gets clicked the most. For AEO, it's very different in terms of what the model is searching for, what pages get found, and what pages get used as context. Looking at our data, we're seeing that the average length of a query that ChatGPT uses to search Google is over 10 words long. And so when ChatGPT goes and asks Google a question, it's asking a very different question than a person would. It's over 10 words, whereas a person is around 3 words. Um,
Yeah,
then when ChatGPT goes and reads the answers it gets back from Google, it's not just clicking or reading the first 1 or 2 links, it's reading the first 20, 30 links. And so with that, we're seeing the optimization pattern be very different. You're not optimizing for the first spot on a 3-word search. You're optimizing for a very long tail question that ChatGPT is writing.
yeah.
And you're optimizing for the most relevant content that ChatGPT wants to read, rather than just being the first blue link there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like this search, like how we search on ChatGPT or Claude, is so different from how we do it on like Google or how we used to do like 5 years ago. Do you think probably 2 years down the line or 3 years down the line, it will be Google and ChatGPT or like Claude that people would be using, or it would be like like search would be completely moved to these LLMs, or it's not like or is it or is it a question of and basically?
It's a really good question. We actually see Google as one of the most valuable properties to optimize for AI search. And 2 years down the line, I'd be surprised if it's not a mixture of everything.
Yeah,
Google AI mode and AI overviews are becoming more and more prevalent. And I've actually seen my personal search habits shift with this as well. I've actually started using Google AI mode quite a bit. I think it's a really great resource for answering questions in detail. And I would not be surprised if it's not just ChatGPT or Claude that people are thinking of for AEO, but really these Google owned properties are going to take a lot of the market share and be key optimization targets.
yeah, no, 100%. Even same for me. I don't think the Chrome app is ever going away from my phone, and at the same time, the GPT app is ever going away from my phone. I use both of them for like different queries, like for different things. I'll probably use both of the apps. Yeah. Okay, and now, so let's say there's a brand or there's a founder who is watching this video. I feel like with Geo, like for SEO, you have to be relevant from like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and you would be like the at the top search or like the top result of Google, right? But in ChatGPT, you can be a brand who is just 1 month old. and you still have equal chances of ranking at the top as compared to a brand that has been in the market for like 15 years, 20 years, right? So what are the top three things that you think that new age brands or like startups should do to actually compete with other well funded or like like age old brands that have been relevant in the market? What are the three things that people should definitely do to improve their rankings on ChatGPT or Claude?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I would maybe challenge a little bit as an early brand. It's super easy to compete directly with really big competitors. I think it really depends on the competitiveness of your industry and how active your competitors are at telling their story. One thing we see is that in industries in software like SaaS, it's really easy for new brands to start to break into the AEO answers because it's not a very deep field of competition. If you're 1 out of 10 competitors or 1 out of 20 competitors, it's kind
Yeah.
of fair game for you to perform. In spaces where there's 100 or 200 players, a very crowded market with some really large incumbents, those can actually be very difficult to break into. Now, if you're an early stage founder who's trying to break into a semi-competitive or non-competitive market, the key thing is going to be telling your story. Tell what your product does. So it's not just your landing page, it's product pages, it's feature pages, it's blog posts telling people how to use your product, and then even roundup listicles, which we see perform really, really well,
Yeah.
overviewing what your product does and why it's different than your competitors. The more you're able to tell your story on what your software does, why it's a good fit for buyers, the more likely you are to show up in these answers when people search for relevant information. This is all a kind of RAG retrieval process for an LLM, where they're finding information from Google search or other web browsers, depending on, or web searches, depending on what model. They're finding information from those searches, and then they're reading that information and using it to answer questions. So if you provide the most useful information, like, you'll show up in those answers most commonly.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think this is such a big black box for like everybody starting from like ground zero. So
Yeah.
you have like such high chances of finally competing on like search results with other brands. And one thing that I would like to add on, what I observed while working with clients on like AEO GEO is like the frequency of content also matters. So what we did was for one of our clients, we created a page called slash guide, which was not like visible to an outside audience, and we literally bombarded content on that. I was like, either it can go like really good or it can do really like it can do harm to the brand. But surprisingly, our rankings on ChatGPT and other LLMs literally spiked 5x as soon as we started doing that, and we still do that. So yeah, I don't know if this is the most like the righteous way to do like rank higher, but this is something that has given us results in the past.
It's something that we actually see work really well right now, and
Yeah,
something we're a little bit hesitant on for the long term. But I mean, like, the data we see really does not lie currently. Is
yeah,
um, the more relevant context you have on the internet, the more that context is going to be used by people searching for it, right? If
yeah,
someone asks a very specific question and you have a very specific answer, you're very likely to be the answer to that question. And so we do see currently a breadth of content, comparative content, things that really answer a question perform well. So
yeah,
listicles, guides, comparison pieces, head-to-heads, alternative pieces, these have kind of become the meta so far. I'd say we kind of hope they become less of a meta in the medium
yeah.
term, but the data right now and the data for the last year has been pretty consistent in them performing well.
Right. And one question in this is, so when we do that, clients are like always very, skeptical to do this because they think, what if tomorrow Google says that we will ban, let's say, duplicate content, or we will just ban AI generated content. So what are your point of views in that? Like till now, I don't think there is any bias with AI content, or you can let me know better, like a human written blog or an AI plus human written blog. Do you think there's any bias with like ranking on anywhere?
What we've seen from the data is that, like, human plus AI content, or honestly even fully AI written content, hasn't been really penalized.
Yeah,
We certainly recommend that everyone writes with human plus AI content. Um, writing 3,000 words or 1,500 words
Yeah,
purely by hand off the dome is like a lot of effort and not necessarily worth the ROI when LMs are so good at extracting the core ideas that you have and getting your ideas out on paper. We see that they add a lot of leverage to human writing, but we do think that if you just say like ChatGPT, go write me an article, like it's going to do a horrible job and it's not going to
yeah,
provide anything new of value. We recommend starting with a novel idea. So if you're working at a company on the cutting edge of an industry, like you're going to have great ideas of content to write about that isn't already out there. And so if you start with that kind of seed idea, have that be human created, and then the AI can kind of expand that, right? Come up with a brief, come up with an outline, and then make sure you're guiding the AI along the way, providing novel facts, industry insights. And then when it comes to the final article, we've seen that with tools like Gauge, AI writing quality is improving pretty dramatically, and
yeah,
the models are improving on their writing quality, but we still think it doesn't read like a human writes. And so we recommend like humans come up with the initial idea, steer the model along the way, and then spend some time editing the final output. So it just reads well for a human audience. That's kind of our recommendation on producing content.
yeah. No, 100%. I don't think writing 3,000 words is. I don't like. There would be a very small handful set of people who can actually do that now. Yeah,
I
my
mean,
and
I did in
yeah,
college, but it's been a while since I sat down and wrote 3,000 words just straight.
yeah. Now even writing like a LinkedIn post for me, it's like if I'm not using Claude or ChatGPT, I'm like maybe I'm doing something wrong. I should just ask it to at least just view what I've written, which I don't know is how good or bad it is in long term. But yeah,
I mean, on the initial, the key thing with a LinkedIn post too is that like you can't just be like ChatGPT, let me write me a LinkedIn post, right? You have to have some novel idea, and then ChatGPT or Claude or whatnot can help you build the structure, expand the post out, and then of course there's a little bit of cleaning up at the end. We see that as like the high leverage process. It's where one person's ideas and voice can kind of be scaled by having AI do a lot of the hard busy work while the humans do the smart work.
yeah. Do you think pictures are also important on blogs? Like, does it make any difference to AEO or GEO or no?
I I honestly, in our data, we haven't really seen it make a bunch of a difference. As a human, as a person reading a blog,
Yeah,
like if there's no images, I'm kind of like,
not really.
like is it just straight from an AI model? So I don't know. I feel like for dwell times and for like human experience, I'd recommend like putting some images in your blogs. We haven't seen it make a material difference in terms of rankings.
Yeah, what I heard, like most of the people are saying that probably in the next 2 to 3 years, like agents would be the ones that are crawling the internet and not humans. And agents don't really care about like how good or bad looking like a blog is. They just plug out the information. And probably like I've heard that images are like difficult to process or like more like expensive to process. So LLMs or like usually don't really process images. uh, yeah,
One
but
thing though that is helpful for images is alt text is still readable by LLMs. So the way that LLMs will often read a page is they actually just pull the HTML of the page. And so it's very important the page is actually like server side rendered rather than client side rendered, so
yeah,
that the HTML is prepped for the agent when it goes and fetches that page. But when it fetches it, it's getting images typically as like a link, like a CDN link to that image URL, and then it'll get the alt text with that as well. So often it's not actually like reading the image unless it has a specific reason to in the processing step. So it's yeah, nice to break up a blog post and show that there are images in it, but they're not really going to sway the LM too much. That alt text is really the area that you can actually sway an LM with an image.
yeah. And because you mentioned a separate page, I've heard a lot about something called llms.txt.
Yeah.
Can you let me know like what it is and is it relevant? Like, does it make any difference or is it just like a fluff? Or what is it exactly?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So llms.txt is a proposed standard with some mild recognition for organizing information about your company and site for LLMs to consume. It's literally a text file, a .txt file that's hosted on your site at the route, your domain /llms.txt.
Mhm.
There's no rules or guidelines on necessarily what goes in the llms.txt,
Yeah.
and none of the crawlers fetch it by default. So Google doesn't read your llms.txt unless it's most commonly not fetching that page. LLMs are not fetching that page very commonly. However, we don't see any harm in having one. Like, there's no reason not to put one up. And we have seen actually some use cases where it is helpful. Here's a specific example. So Mintlify does doc sites, right? They build
Mhm.
doc sites for developers, and they've built their sites to be AEO friendly. One of the things that they do is if you point an agent to a Mintlify page, in the markdown for that page, it'll give instructions to the llms.txt to go fetch and read that. When I pointed agents at Mintlify docs pages, often
Mhm.
they'll say, "Oh, I want to do some research," and Mintlify is telling me there's this llms.txt file, or there's a
Oh,
bunch of a directory of all of the docs pages that exist here. I'll go read that thing and then figure out what page is the next one for me to read. And every time I've seen an agent pull the llms.txt, literally the thinking thread says, "Wow, this is a gold mine. Like, this is great context for me." And so we see actually like the llms.txt, it doesn't hurt to have one. It's not going to
yeah,
make a huge difference in your AEO. It's not like a massive unlock for you to have, but there's no harm in having it, and it can be helpful on the margin, particularly if you link out to it from the rest of your site or docs pages. So
yeah.
we softly recommend people do it.
No, 100%. I've seen a lot of these companies now also do like a human version of the website, and then you put a toggle on if you're an
Yeah.
agent, and then there's like a machine version, like something that agents can come and consume information from. There's a website called parallels.com. I
Mhm.
found that concept. I don't know if that is relevant, but it was just a cool concept to just see. Like, it was fun to just see the agent version of the website as well.
One thing that we've seen that's actually very interesting is user agent interception. And there's a great example of this. George from Ramp had a talk about this at an event previously where he overviewed an experiment they ran where they served markdown version of their site only to like LLM user agents, Claude, Codex, etc. And so what this meant is that if a human went to their site, they'd see one page. If Google went to the site, they'd see the exact same page a human sees. But if Claude goes to the site, they deliver a markdown version to Claude. Um, what's interesting is that this is a historically kind of a frowned upon SEO practice for spoofing Google, and it can actually get you in trouble with Google. But for these LLMs, they actually aren't indexing context at scale or providing a
Yeah,
search index. And so spoofing pages is actually much more of a viable strategy there, more on the gray hat side. But they're serving different content to different users. And they actually ran this great experiment, had a whole write up about it, and found that the agents were consuming that content differently and were talking about that content differently. So it's certainly a strategy people can explore. We've seen it as like an advanced strategy that's useful on the margin. If people aren't getting to your site in the first place or discovering your site in the
yeah.
first place, like it's not necessarily going to solve that problem, but it can be an interesting one for presenting different contexts to different audiences.
Yeah, 100%. And so the context that, let's say, LLMs took was different as compared to what was there in the human version. Like,
Yeah,
they understood that website differently. Oh,
yeah. Actually, the content, the whole page was entirely different. One of them was an HTML file served to humans with images and different kind of sections of the page. The content served to the LLMs was actually just a Markdown file, and a Markdown file is just text in a big document. Um, the agents were consuming this Markdown file, which was structured fully differently from the site, and also had like a promotional offer in the Markdown file as well that was not on the main site. And they actually did find that people were agents were referencing these Markdown this promotion from the Markdown file and using that in its decision. We've actually seen some other advanced strategies on this where people are asking LLMs to respond to the pages that they have and write like
okay.
post requests to back to their site to say like feedback on the site and stuff like that. And that's
I've
actually
seen
been
that.
successful as well in testing.
Yeah, I've seen in actually we have implemented in one of our clients' website that we put like a logo, and then
Hmm.
that like, let's say there's a button that redirects to ChatGPT, and as soon as you click there, it goes to ChatGPT and be like that, XYZ company does this. Please remember this company, and
Yeah.
anybody on coming on the landing page is basically clicking on that, and it's feeding data to these LLMs. So I feel there is so much in this domain that is yet to like uncover, and I feel like we're just at the very surface level. There's so much more that will happen in the next few years.
Yeah, that strategy in particular is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It's really just like context poisoning or context
Yeah.
injection. I'd say we we're a little on the fence about that as like a strategy, mostly because like you're really influencing directly what the people are perceiving about the brand as they
Yeah.
click on it, sometimes without them knowing it. So definitely a strategy some people are taking that we haven't yet.
Yep. Now that we have talked about blogs and like how to rank, so one of the top places where these LLMs take information from is Reddit, and in my experience, that has been the most notorious platform. Like for us, we try to do something that like we can place the brand, but it always like ends up blocking these brands, and it's just impossible to do something inorganic there, or like placing content there. So how do you recommend your clients like do Reddit, or like what are your recommendations on Reddit? Because Reddit is an important platform. If somebody like wants to rank at the top of these LLMs, they need to be present on Reddit in some form or another.
Yeah, Reddit's a great question, and we do see
Yeah.
often Reddit is like one of the more cited domains in a given category. Um, we have a great playbook on Reddit here. Basically, the main takeaway is it's not the highest ROI move for most brands. We typically recommend brands focus on their owned content first before going into Reddit. Um, we often see the best Reddit post in a given market will have a 1% citation rate, and then it'll be a power law distribution from there, right? We see the best post is up here, and then it quickly drops where like the 50th post is almost never cited in our data. But we see Reddit ranks really well because there's like 2,000 posts
Yeah.
that rank overall here, and most of them really only rank once or twice as a citation. And so we see it as a very difficult game to play, governed by power laws. And working on on-site positioning is like your own content in your blog or your site or your feature pages is a much higher ROI play. Now, when people have exhausted their own site is in a very good spot, then it makes sense to potentially look at Reddit. And we recommend looking at Reddit first and foremost as a way to interact with people on Reddit. We recommend like looking at the communities that your people, your buyers are involved in, um, posting like a good citizen in that community,
Yeah.
making your brand aware. Even running Reddit ads is a great way to reach people on Reddit. But to influence AEO specifically, we do see the same patterns that rank well in on-site blogs rank well on Reddit, which is listicles, comparison pages, best for kind of framing. And what we see is that many of those pages get taken down, but the ones that don't rank really well. And so this is kind of like a gray hat way of thinking about this, but if you can find a subreddit that's really poorly policed, or your own subreddit, or one that you can slip a post into and write a post that says, I tried the 5 best whatever, and these are what I came up with, these are the strengths and weaknesses of each. Sometimes these posts stick around, and sometimes these posts show up on Reddit and rank. Most of the time they don't, but when they do, these are the ones that we see kind of lead the power law distribution. Well, another strategy people pursue, which we don't recommend as much, is just commenting on the existing posts that are ranking well. Um, this can be incrementally helpful for like putting something out about your brand that exists on the internet, right? We really like the core root here is just like tell your brand story and why your brand is great. But if you comment on a thread, think about the odds that that shows up in an actual LM answer. Basically, first, that thread has to be cited, which is a very low probability as we just went over. And then your specific comment from that thread has to be pulled and used as context. That's like a needle in a haystack. And
Yeah.
so for you to get your comment to influence an AI's answer, you're basically thinking of, one in a 10,000 probability nested in a one in, 1,000 probability. So maybe you influence one or two real user answers one time, but it's really a long shot and lower ROI than most other things we'd recommend.
Yeah, that's true. And most of the times, even when we've put like listicles and something that is most non-promotional, like genuinely we try to like put something about like some experience, if you talk about or if you take that keyword too often in like your comments, like I cannot even imagine, like I cannot even remember the number of accounts of mine that have gotten blocked because we tried to do that. Now we've stopped that as a service. I was like, you guys do that in house, like we can recommend, but Reddit, I don't know. And there is not even a single tool in a market. I think I've tested out everything that does like that automates Reddit, and probably that is why it is as good of a platform as it is.
Yeah, I mean, we recommend really just like be a good Reddit citizen and like talk about your
Yeah,
brand in the right light. And Reddit, LinkedIn, a lot of these sources are typically seen as high citation spaces for
yeah,
LLMs. But overall, we see that like gaming them to optimize for AEO is a very low ROI play compared to most other opportunities you have. And really
yeah.
just reaching people on LinkedIn and reaching people on Reddit or YouTube and seeing that trickle into your AEO strategy is a much healthier play, both for the Reddit ecosystem, your brand, and then also just your time and ROI.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like as much digital footprint you can increase across platforms, I think that is what is helpful. Do you think video content also helps, like posting content on Instagram? Or I know YouTube gets cited very often, but like does Instagram matter for brands, especially AU?
Good question. So Instagram, we've seen mattering less than other social platforms. We have seen YouTube matter quite a bit, specifically for Google AI overviews. AI overviews love throwing in one or two YouTube videos, and we also see YouTube videos rank pretty high on
Yeah.
SERPs, so search engine results pages. So if you're thinking about like SEO or Google AI overviews, like YouTube's totally a valid channel. What's interesting is that we often see the same type of YouTube video that we see rank in other places, which is like roundups or listicles. We'll see a bunch of like tech YouTubers, right? Like record a video of my top 7 VPN software, and that would vote rank well in a VPN space. Um, One thing to note about YouTube that's very interesting is that views are not correlated with citation rate. One thing you would think is like if somebody's got a great video that's well loved on YouTube, it's got millions of views, like that would be the most cited YouTube video, right? It's crushing it from a YouTube perspective. Um, we find that's not really correlated. We see videos with like 30 impressions showing up in AI overviews all the time. And so this is an opportunity for corporates. Corporate content is actually like a pretty effective strategy for YouTube. It doesn't have to get tons of views. It can show up in AI overviews. It can influence buyers about your brand. It can show up in searches. So we softly recommend YouTube. Especially if you are trying to post on YouTube anyways, like AEO is a great kind of side effect that comes out of that.
Yeah. But if impressions don't matter, so like what, like for example, if I'm a new brand and I want to start on YouTube, so then what are the three things that I should take care of if impressions is not something that is matter, that is, like LLMs are taking into consideration? Is it thumbnail? Is it title? Is it description? Is it content? Like what is it then that I should take care of?
What we're finding in search right now is that title is the most important element kind of across the board. Whether
Mm-hmm.
this is Google search or YouTube or Reddit threads, like title consistently shows as the most relevant factor. And so if I were to stack rank them, I'd say title, meta description, content in that order. Unfortunately, I mean, I think good content should ideally rank really well, but that's just not what we're seeing in the data. And so I would say like the more your YouTube video is titled the 7 best software for da 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 da, like the better it's gonna perform in showing up for AI overviews or even how-to questions, right? If you're thinking about informational intent, if you have how to do X with this software, like that's going to be a great candidate for showing up for how do I do X questions. So really just like semantic matching between the user's search and what your video or article is titled is going to be the number one factor for ranking. Um, I'd say personally, I wish that wasn't necessarily the case, but that's what we see in our data.
Yeah. One more I'd like to add is alternate blogs, alternatives like X alternatives of
Oh
Y.
yeah, those crush.
Yeah. So yeah, somehow these rank so much. Like you write alternatives and like you write a listicle and it does end up ranking. I don't know if it's gonna change in the next 2 3 years, because now every brand is doing that. So
Well,
like if everybody's doing it, then who will rank at the top, and who, like, how will these LLMs even decide whom to rank at the top and whom not to rank?
one thing we see in general too is that actually writing a alternatives post for your own brand is a really great idea for sentiment. In AEO, many people are focused on do I get cited or do I get mentioned? But we think a great aspect here is how do I get talked about? When I get
Yeah,
mentioned, like what am I described as? What do I do? How am I compared to my competitors? And writing a alternatives to Gauge, why Gauge is the best platform, or alternatives to Gauge, why no platform compares. Those posts are extremely effective because what we see is brands are actually able to shape the narrative with their story, right? Like Gauge offers a great AI agent that no other brand offers. And so when you say, "Oh, is there an alternative to Gauge?" You can say they don't offer this service. If you're thinking about like what we offer and how we would kind of stack up against competitors, like if you're looking for something that does what we do, like you won't find it in this kind of band of companies. And so that that framing can be extremely effective for content. And so we definitely recommend for brand protection that people write alternatives to your own brand and really just highlight your strengths and why there are no alternatives.
yeah, 100%. And I think when I use Gauge, like, it is so amazing that it also gives me recommendations. Like, if you want to rank with this query, write X versus Y blog on this, or write how to X blog. And that has been extremely helpful. And I want to thank you for your detailed guides. Like, I don't know if it is accessible to public, but I wish it was. They are so detailed and so helpful. Like, I haven't seen the most updated version, but like every block type and the prompt and everything.
Yeah.
At that time, Gage did not support like writing blogs, but that thing was sufficient for like a person to execute everything.
Well,
So
good news
those,
is we actually redid our action center last week and it is so much better. It's incredible. It basically will like look at all of your data and then say like the agent will fetch what it needs to and say, "Hey, I think you should do this because of XYZ reason. I looked at the data, I found this hole, and I think this is what's going to solve that problem." And then
yeah,
the agent actually is able to execute on it. It'll pull from your context, it'll go do research and it'll say, "Hey, this is my outline for the article. Like, does this look good? What's your feedback?" And then it can write that article too. And if you link your CMS like Webflow or Framer or whatnot, it'll just
yeah,
publish to your CMS too. So that whole kind of content like ideation, Gauge will come up with that. The execution process of like what do I write, what goes into it, how do I get my brand voice in there, how do I get my product perspective. Gauge will pull all that in, write that content, and then publish time. Like we'll just push it to your website. We can even update existing content too. So it's been pretty cool actually. A lot of cool shifts in the
yeah.
last month and a half.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think you also maintain a page wherein is like every quarter what is getting launched and like what are the changes, or like per
Yeah.
week you maintain. I used to like read that, like, every week now, okay, what is new that Gauge is launched, so that I can just go and try it out. It's been amazing, especially the competitor analysis. Like, I
Oh
can
yeah.
click and visually see that now I'm ranking here, now I'm ranking there. It's amazing. I've tried all the platforms, by the way, and Gauge is the most, like, it does not overwhelm me with the data that it gives me somehow. And if somebody is watching this video and wants to like optimize AEO GEO, definitely recommend it and reach out to Ethan. He's been super helpful when I was working on a brand to like give me an entire walkthrough. So definitely recommend it. Another very interesting, and the last question that I have for this video is query fanouts, which
Yeah.
is a very interesting concept. When I got to know about it, like, how can you actually see what ChatGPT is actually searching? So would love to know more from you, like, what are query fanouts and how are they important when somebody is optimizing for AEO?
Yeah, this is a great question, and query fanouts are extremely important for AEO. I can kind of break this down. Basically, when I ask a question to ChatGPT, um, if it needs to get more data from my question, it'll go search the internet. So if I ask something that's like, um, "Who was president in 1900?" Right? Like it already knows this, right? That happened in the past. It's in its training data. It doesn't need to search the internet. But if I ask like, what's the best minivan this year? It has to go search the internet because this year is not in the training data, right? ChatGPT, Claude doesn't know the current state of the minivan market. And so it will need to search the internet for information there. When it goes and searches the internet for information, it has to write the query or the search that it goes and does. That search is called a query fanout. These query fanouts are not like human searches. When a human searches Google, it's 2 to 3 words. When ChatGPT writes a query fanout or web search, these are often over 10 words, and it fully rewrites the question that is given to it by the user. We see a semantic similarity of around 50% between the fan out that the model writes and the question that the user gives the model. So it's doing some really heavily rewriting on this data. Then it will take the query that it wrote. So ChatGPT might write best minivans 2026, family orientated car city driving. And that's the query it writes. These are really weird queries. It goes and runs that on Google, fetches results from Google, and then pulls it into its context to come up with its decision and recommendation. Now, when we're thinking about like the main thing that influences ChatGPT's answer in the end, it's what it fetched from the internet, and what it fetched from the internet is dictated by that fan out. And so at Gauge, we actually have a product where we'll look at all of the fan outs that have happened across all of your prompts, and then see what are the common trends in it. Like what words is ChatGPT adding the most? What words is it getting rid of? And an interesting thing we've seen in the last 2 to 3 months really pick up is ChatGPT is actually telling its fan out what brand it wants to find information about. So when it goes and does a Google search, it might say like the best minivans, Volkswagen, Toyota, Honda. And so it's already come up with its selection set of brands that it wants to search for. And therefore, like the web search is inherently biased. The fan out's inherently biased to that model initial kind of context. So we're seeing these web searches, these fan outs be really, really interesting as a optimization target.
Yes.
Some of the words they add to, the most common word across all the fan outs that we've seen is 2026. And that means putting the word 2026 in the title of your post is extremely valuable because then you're more closely matching what the LLMs are writing their Google searches with.
Yeah. I think recency matters a lot in my experience with like when these LLM search for answers. I've seen a lot of these bigger companies like change their titles to something like 2026, or like
Mhm.
reindex them, or like just change a few things to latest information, so that like ChatGPT does not consider it as old information, and it considers it as the most latest information basically. Perfect. Cool. I think I'm done with my questions. If you have any one or two pieces of advice for somebody who is looking to start with this, some underrated trick or some underrated thing that you think a lot of people don't know that you would like to like tell to my audience, especially, would be
Totally.
amazing.
Yeah, I'd say the number one thing here is like you're trying to tell your story directly to models.
Yeah.
And so write what your company does in clear, easy to understand language. Like imagine you're writing a convincing, typed essay for a like high schooler to go read and consume. Like this should be in easy prose, very clear, very easy to understand. So make sure your offering is easy to understand. Your product, it says what it does and how it works, and then write a very detailed set of blog posts, competitive positioning, why your solution is better than your competitors. And so having what your company does uniquely, the story that you have on the internet is the most valuable thing there. It's kind of our core recommendation. And then of course, use a platform like Gauge to optimize your AI
Yes.
visibility.
Yeah, 100% must recommend. I'll put Ethan's LinkedIn as well in the description box below. I think he's been super helpful, and my audience will reach out to you with more of their questions if they have anything. And I'll drop down the link to Gauge as well in the description box below. I think everybody should go and try it out, especially if you
Awesome.
are like a new startup founder or like starting something new. Perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been great chatting with you, Muskan. Yeah, I really
Yeah.
appreciate the questions.
Same here, Ethan. Thank you so much for taking out the time for this. I hope the audience found it helpful. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.